Hello and welcome to the Change Gang podcast with me, your host, Laura Ordile. I'm here to help you hold on to your sanity and your soul as you move through big change in your life. I'm here to guide you, inform you, and hopefully help you to triumph over trauma and the long list of symptoms that come along with it. This podcast series is to bring knowledge, share stories, and open up conversation around hope for those of you that suffer with the difficulties that present themselves in your life, from diagnosed or undiagnosed trauma. Labeled or not, I know you need help, and so do those that have graciously taken the time to have these conversations with me. So let's get to it. Welcome to the Week Change Gang. You might hear me say that more than once because I'm actually going to replay over the next couple weeks some wonderful conversations that I had with a person named Sarah Yuen. And I'm doing that because she has really opened the door and put a lot of information out for a group called CATCH, C-A-T-C-H, CATCH PTSD. And with it being December and around the holidays and a time when people really struggle, I thought it would be great to put some of this information back out just in case anyone needs information or connection or whatever it is. So, here you go. Enjoy. Welcome to the Week Change Gang. I have the amazing Sarah Yuen back with me. I love having conversations with her. They're always so informative and so wonderful. And we're on the triumphing over trauma side of the podcast this week. And I'm super excited because we get to talk about a wonderful new organization that Sarah's put together called CATCH. So thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. So this has been something that's been in the back of your mind for a while, I know. And then you kind of did a soft launch, I guess you would say, a few months back, and now you're starting to really put some drive and get so many people involved in having it there. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what CATCH is so everyone listening can be aware of that?
Yeah, sure. So it's catchptsd.com, and the CATCH means Crisis and Trauma Clinical Hypnotherapy. So it worked together quite well. And as you may have known, those who've heard me on here before, that I am a clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in PTSD and trauma. And I've been doing that now for a number of years and trying to get through as many clients as possible who need help. And that number has been growing and growing and growing, especially with all the events of the past 4 years. And therefore, after a while, it became quite obvious that there's not enough of me to do this. And even the number of people that were coming to me, let alone the people who might be turning up with other hypnotherapists, was just growing to a point where people were on a waiting list for 6 months to a year. And so I decided that the best thing I could do was to take all these years of using hypnotherapy to cure PTSD and everything that all these clients had told me about how PTSD manifests and how one eliminates it, and share it with other hypnotherapists. And now obviously all mental health professionals, medical professionals, we all have different ways of working. But the one thing that I find wonderful about hypnotherapists is they're so curious, and it's a field where we're curious every day, given what our clients tell us, what we're seeing, what we're hearing. And therefore, when you go out to a group of professionals like clinical hypnotherapists and say, look, I've been using this particular method and getting amazing results, they don't sneer at you or say, oh, it's all good bully for you, but they want to know what you've been doing and then use whatever bits of what you're doing in their own work. So I ended up running training courses. It sounds a bit rude to say that really, because everyone was already trained, but using the information that I'd gathered and just dumping it on everybody else. And within a year, there were several hundred clinical hypnotherapists who were now looking at what I was doing and saying, I can use bits of that, and I do understand that, and that's widened my understanding as well, given what all these guys have said. So then I thought, so now it's not just me. Now there's at least 100 people here who know how to deal with PTSD. And this is the biggest problem, that so many people have this gamut of symptoms and they go to a therapist, another therapist out of the Yellow Pages, and they say, I've got PTSD and here's my symptoms. And because they often present with a smorgasbord of symptoms, like 10, 12, 15 symptoms, a lot of therapists don't know what to do. I mean, what do you start with? How do you help that person? Do you go symptom by symptom, or what should you do? And I was teaching people, no, the symptoms are very uncomfortable and horrible for the person, but they're irrelevant when it comes to eliminating them, as you know. And so all you had to do is find the root cause. So I thought, all these people are now a network. We were our own network, talking every day and gathering and consulting on how to help people best. And so now we could actually be a real network, professional network, where people could plug into all of us at once and pick who they like best. So I then developed catchptsd.com to take the best of all the clinical hypnotherapists in the world and put them on one portal, so that anyone who's walking around with their 15 PTSD-type symptoms no longer has to stab in the dark, but can go to one website, go through everybody listed on that website in all the different countries. There's a map search, or there's a search if you just want a man, or if you just want a woman, or if you want someone who's been a first responder, or if you want someone who's been a military person. So you can literally hone your choice down. And then on those pages, you can listen to people talk about how they practice. You can listen to their recordings for free, and you can get an idea of whether you think that person would be able to help you best. And so that's what we did. As you know, you're on it because you're one of those people. And we created, now I think there's about 75 to 80 people on there. As more and more people train in this method, then more and more people are presenting case histories to show that they are capable of treating the worst symptoms of PTSD. And now people are starting to come to me especially and say, I've seen your podcast, I've seen your recordings, and I need help. And because my own waiting list is so long, I'm able to say, oh, well, I can help you there. I can refer you to someone who's in your area, or someone who works online, or someone I think you would really gel with. And you can then be treated by that person rather than by me. And it's really beginning to work very well. It's beginning to take off, and we're about to start a big podcast series so that people can watch bite-sized information about PTSD and then realize that we know what we're talking about, and we can certainly eliminate PTSD, and in just a few sessions. And so this is the crux of catchptsd.com. I am not the crux. I am just one within that network. So there's no hierarchy within that network. But our goal is to be the BetterHelp of PTSD. So those of you who know the BetterHelp therapy site, where you can go get online therapy, get it right now, get it at 2 a.m, whatever you need, this will be the PTSD version of BetterHelp. And that's our goal.
I have to disagree with you just for a minute on the hierarchy, because I think this is an important part to mention about this. You mentioned it in what you just said. Not just anyone can go get on that site and be a part of it. You actually do have people submit case histories on what they've done so that you can see that they're working within what you've taught, at least in some way that goes along with being able to eliminate the PTSD. So it's not just anybody can come jump on the site. They get filtered in through you being very aware of their work, having talked with them, having gone back and forth maybe with some of the people or the cases, because we do as a group, which I think is great, get together and brainstorm with each other or ask questions or give ideas if we're stuck in something or not sure. Because honestly, this is work that a lot of people won't do. I don't think I've ever heard you say that you wouldn't work with someone. I can't think of a case that you've shared that you turned away. Has there ever been one?
Only for one reason. So I would never turn anyone away because the symptoms were too difficult, or that what they were experiencing was too complex, or anything like that. But I turn them away if they don't want to get better. So yes, I remember waking up middle of the night and this voice was screaming in my head saying, don't treat the unwilling. And I had until that point decided, I suppose with my kind of savior complex, decided that I could obviously treat everybody, and therefore I would keep going with certain people until I realized that sometimes there is a need for certain people to stay in the situation they're in, whether it be financial, emotional or practical or whatever it is. And then it became very difficult. But no, and that is a key point about Catch PTSD. CatchPTSD.com and everything you've just said, the people who end up in hypnotherapy for PTSD are the people who haven't been able to get help anywhere else. And I know that's a dreadful thing to say, but it's like hypnotherapy is a bit like the last resort. People will try anything else and then think, well, hypnotherapy, I'll give that a go. And it's sad because in a way we could have helped these people so much earlier, but hypnotherapy kind of has that reputation of if nothing else works, try that. And so the people that come to us generally come after a number of years when those symptoms have got stronger and stronger and stronger and worse and worse and worse. And it's very important to me that when they first make contact with Catch PTSD, that no one is going to say, oh, sorry, you're a bit complicated for me. I can't help you. Because if we're going to be the last resort, let's be the last resort. We're not going to say, sorry, you've got to go and actually there's no one else now for you. So I have, even though it sounds arrogant, having created this portal, feel that I have to be sure that the people who are going to be listed on there know every single aspect of PTSD, every way it could present, everything that might look like, oh, this is a difficult client is not a difficult client. This is a suffering client. And so I have asked, following the training in inverted commas that I did, I have asked that everybody show me their work with people who have been suffering from PTSD and show me that they understand where these symptoms might be coming from. And as you just said, it's a very difficult, complex subject that although the mind knows what's wrong, the hypnotherapist is an archaeologist with the patient, and between them, they're digging into so much of what has caused these symptoms. And sometimes archaeologists get stumped. Sometimes you and your client think, well, I've been down through every level and there's nothing there. So where are these symptoms coming from? And sometimes it takes an objective view from somebody else to say, well, did you consider this? And so that's when you talk about that, isn't it? That group of people that any time of the day or night, because some of us are in New Zealand, some of us are in Mauritius, some of us are in America or Europe, at any time of the day or night when you go, help, I've got to this point and we haven't cleared it. What do I do next? Someone's going to answer you within 5 minutes. It's a bit like WebMD, but it's web hypnotherapy. I suppose what I just want to say is it is a very niche group of people who are very, very experienced already before they even started using this method. And they know every possible aspect that has arisen already. I mean, more might come, and that they are not going to say, I can't help you. And if their books are full, which many of us had to have very full books, if the books are full, they'll simply pass them to somebody else within that grouping who also is highly experienced. And I also just want to add that many psychiatrists, many psychologists do not understand PTSD. They don't understand the concept of a root cause. Some do, but then don't understand ego parts or how they present or what happens. And so people who are trained for 7, 8, 9, 10 years in mental health do not necessarily have the knowledge which we as hypnotherapists have as a result of what our clients have told us as they've got better.
I find that so important for people to know, because I get frustrated. I kind of get a little spicy with people sometimes because I've had people come to me and say, wow, this can take years and years and years of treatment before you can be healed, or it's really a sensitive thing. And I just want to flick them and say, no, don't tell people that. Quit telling people they're so broken they might not ever heal, or it's going to take them years to heal. That's not the truth. And I think that's what struck such a chord with me. I knew that at I want to say at the soul level, when I started your training and you started talking about things, it's like, where have you been all my life? Yes, 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 yes. I knew deep down that all of the things that you were talking about were exactly right. And that so many people, if nothing else, I wish they would go listen to your training. Even if they don't want to do the work, I think it's incredible information that's in there that everyone should know, which is why I'm doing this podcast now, even to bring some of that information out there. But I think what you've done with Catch too is so incredible, because it's like a web of support. support for everyone out there and for everyone within it. Like you said, we can turn to each other and say, hey, this person's having this reaction. I'm not really sure. Is that okay? Do I do anything? Do I not do anything? And because maybe we've never experienced that particular reaction before, but when we come in there, someone in one of those 100 of people has probably experienced that before, and they go, absolutely, keep going, or do this, or switch it up here. Everything's okay. And to just have that support right there of everything's okay is so amazing. It's so amazing.
And I think also that just simply the fact that we don't have any egos, because of course what we do is basically telling everyone, get rid of your egos. We have to get rid of ours first. And so we don't have egos to say, I'm better than you, or I can create this better than you can, or whatever. It's simply a grouping of people who, to be quite honest, we are as naive at the archaeology as the patient, but we can only bring what we've already met and say, oh yes, I had a guy who did that, and the reason was this. And so maybe that's related. And so it is a case of pulling all that information together and being able to help. I mean, I'm an ex-TV reporter. I'm not a therapist, but the one thing about being a television reporter is you're very curious. And a lot of us who are the clinical hypnotherapists in Catch, we've all got corporate backgrounds that made us very curious about life. And so we haven't been taught in a very rigid standard way. We've been shown how to make people so relaxed, to slow down the processes in their brain, to allow them to get past all the defenses that they've erected, to be able to understand what's wrong with themselves. We know how to do that. That's just Lego. That's mechanic. But then when they get down there and their body starts talking to them and they start to see things in a dreamlike state, or they start to just feel something, that's all new to them, but it's also new to us. But I think, like, people say, oh, you know so much. How do you know so much? You bring all this to us. But of course, all I know is what they said. And so this is like knowledge from the root. This is knowledge from the base of these people as to what happened when they were 3 that's then derailing their life when they're 50. And there is a big argument in hypnotherapy about whether you need to do what Catch does. Because a lot of people in hypnotherapy say, why are you looking back? Look forward. Who cares about the root cause of why somebody feels that way? You know, just tell them. You just forget that and move forward. And what they don't realize is that everything that's already happened is like chains around your legs. And while you're trying to move forward, and to be honest, you've been trying to do that for 30 years, there's like these chains pulling you back to what happened when you were small. And it's like a pattern through your life. And unless you can use hypnotherapy to break that chain, then you haven't got much hope of being able to go forward in a calm, peaceful, relaxed manner. So I think that Catch is essential to take you back to what happened so that you can clear the way to go forward. Take the weight off your shoulders, take those chains off your legs, take away everything that you've been dragging with you on that pallet behind you, so that you can then just say, right, I get it, I understand it, I can't change it, that's what happened, that's why I've reacted like this till I'm 54, time to start afresh. And it's like resetting factory settings on your phone. It's just like wiping it yourself clear so that you can go forward. And so I believe that it's essential to do that. And that's why Catch takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and CBT or any sort of talking therapy takes 4 years, and you're still going.
I love that you brought that up, because that's been a lot on my mind lately too, because I watch some of the people who attack. Of course, on social media, people love to attack. But they attack some of the work that we're doing and the way that we're doing it. I notice a lot of them will say, that's old news, that's old way of doing it, you don't need to do it that way anymore. And what I find fascinating is that the work that Catch PTSD, the protocol that's in there, embedded in there, that people are working with, is based on some very foundational work that's been in place, proven time and time again to work. And I love that part of it. And I think anymore, some of the people that attack it, they've created their quote unquote way of doing something in their course and their this, and you've got to do it my way now, and it can be so much quicker. But what they don't understand is they're almost like clipping the top of the weed when they're doing some of it. And so they get rid of a couple of the symptoms for a little while. But just like any weed, those things oftentimes end up coming back. or something else sprouts up right out of the side of it or the next of it because you didn't go down and get that root. You didn't do that thing. And the work that you're doing is based on some work that was at the 1950s or earlier?
Oh, earlier, the First World War.
You can never remember which one.
It's probably the Egyptians, really. But the Egyptians and the Greeks, they knew how to use hypnotherapy. But the methods that we're using, as you say, are from World War One. And it's very interesting to realize that in World War One, there were people as savvy as we are now in terms of, without all the technology, who understood that when men went to war, that they could be vulnerable if they'd had a life that was very difficult before they even went. And as you can imagine, I mean, there was a lot of people with a lot of trauma back in the First World War, given the way that children were brought up and the way society lived. And so they realized, particularly wonderful guy called William Brown, who was one of the doctors who was sent out to the trenches to try and help people with shell shock on site, as it were. And he realized that the people who were cracking, although how anyone didn't crack, I don't know, but the people who really were cracking were the people who had an exposure to some prior trauma. And he was using hypnotherapy. And when they were bringing guys back who were broken physically as well as mentally, they couldn't walk, they were bent over, or they looked like they had rickets when they were walking, they put them in a hospital in the UK, in Scotland, the Craig-Lockhart Hospital. And they were doing rapid hypnotherapy on them, like 3, 4, 5 hours of hypnotherapy, which is essentially what we do, but we do it over 5 weeks. But they did it in 5 hours. And these guys could suddenly walk normally again and could suddenly talk normally again. And they realized very quickly, okay, so there is a predisposition here to trauma. If you've already got buckets of trauma, this is another bucket. And in the end, the body can't carry all those buckets. And somebody who went to war without trauma went without having to carry the buckets, which obviously meant they could run faster and get away faster. And so they brought back about 24,000 people after the Battle of the Somme and treated them all with hypnotherapy. And a lot of those people got better. But when it came to the Battle of Passchendaele a year later, they decided that it was too expensive to use hypnotherapy on all these people, so they just left them out there in the trenches, and I imagine a lot of them got sent back to the trenches and died. And then at the end, very interesting, at the end of the war, the First World War, it was noted that people who had a lot of trauma should not be sent to war, not even drafted, because they were not going to last very long. And so that was put into the annals of history, as it were. But when 1939 came around, no one paid any attention to that. Like now, they don't pay any attention to it now. And so they then just drafted any old body in 1939. And then an American psychiatrist who was given the worst of the cases coming back from the European front, he decided that as a last resort therapy, he would try hypnotherapy on the people who were coming back. And that had enormous results, a guy called Dr. John Watkins. And so we have taken the elements of what William Brown was using, and we've taken the elements of what John Watkins was using. And then there was a father and son hypnotherapist in the Vietnam War who was David and Herbert Spiegel, who started to use those methods again on people who've suffered enormous trauma. But even though the actual problem was what they'd suffered before they left, but obviously they've been put under immense pressure. And you're right, in the hypnotherapy groups especially, people are like, why are you doing something from 1918? Why are you doing something from 1943? What's wrong with you? Why have you not advanced? And it's like, well, if they could fix somebody who's been in the trenches for a year and has shell shock to the point they can't walk, they can't talk, they can't hear, they can't see, and it works, I think I'm going to have some of that for my people who've come back from Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else, or have lived with awful situations, parental situations, or lived with abusive husbands or wives. I'm going to have a go at that. And the silly thing is, it's not rocket science. It is extreme relaxation. And if you have a body tense, literally from the head to the toe, you're going to have pain, you're going to have stress, you're going to have parts of the body that don't work because they're not getting any blood to them, and then that's going to cause more issues. And if you can relax that body, which this deep somnambulistic hypnotherapy does, then that allows you to start the healing process inside. So if you take someone into hypnosis, not very deeply, talk to them about things they can remember and what's happening in their life right now, and then give them 20 minutes and say, okay, you're done, or, and even if you give them an hour and you say you're done, that's one thing. But we don't even start the hypnotherapy till 45 minutes in terms of the therapy section. We spend 45 minutes making sure the whole body's dissolved into jello. And that pays enormous dividends. And just to give you an example, there are 2 consultants at the National Health Service in the UK who also looked at 1918, 1945, 1963 and thought, we're going to have some of that, and started just using the relaxation only, not the actual investigative archaeological work. And people were getting better just from this immense, intense relaxation. So there is real precedent that this is the way to heal a body that has carried these PTSD symptoms. And you and I and the other 60, 70 people on Catch are seeing chronic PTSD symptoms. And you see PTSD, is it chronic PTSD or does it mean complex or does it mean cumulative? Who cares? They just made it up anyway. But we are seeing people with chronic symptoms shed them in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 7 weeks. How does the body go from being virtually crippled or virtually incapable of functioning to feeling as if the whole weight has been lifted off someone's shoulders and they can actually start a new life from here to the summer holidays? And I don't even believe it myself. I watch it happen day after day after day. I'm sure you do too. And I'm like, really? But it does.
Are you sure you're okay? Are you sure?
Yeah. And I would just like to say there's a film taken from the Second World War on war neuroses. And it's very interesting. It's a very hoity-toity psychiatrist asking questions of these poor guys who've just crawled out of a trench. It's a bit uncomfortable. But I notice when you look at how it's been filmed, the guy is writing down on his notepad as he's interviewing these people, asking them why they can't cope. And he's written, father left home at 3, mother was negligent or alcoholic, bullied at school at 12. And he's written that. And these are pictures from 1940. And so the psychiatrists then were aware of predispositions, and everybody on Catch is looking for predispositions, and everybody on Catch is able to override the programming of those predispositions.
Yes. And I think the one thing that all of those people who are jumping on what we're doing or who go against it or who say, oh my goodness, what are you doing? The one thing that they absolutely cannot argue with is results. I know so many people in there know, well, it worked and it worked. And it worked. You can say whatever you want to say, but I'm telling you it worked.
And of course, we are at the mercy of the body. So we're practical as well as extremely hopeful. So when you take in a client, obviously you desperately want them to get better. They desperately want to get better. And there is a problem where in your mind and in their mind, there's so much positivity brimming between you that this can work because they've read other case histories that have worked, that you kind of feel like, well, 10 out of 10 cases are going to get better. I always have to tell myself not 10 out of 10, because when it doesn't work because there is a reason that the part inside of that person that's creating those symptoms does not want to let go. And this doesn't mean that they all never let go. It may mean that it takes a little bit longer, or it may mean that they might have to go away, ponder on things a little bit, decide if their situation is the way they want it to be, whether they could change things to make their life easier, and then come back. So a few people have said to me, oh, you said it would work. I read your book. It worked for all those people. And you said it would work, and it hasn't worked. And I'm like, yeah, but you're still sitting in the middle of a highly abusive situation, which is dragging you down. So it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back for you in your mind. Or some people will be receiving benefits and receiving a lot of help and a status of being damaged, which the body feels is a good thing, because then this person is nurtured when they weren't nurtured when they were small. So why are we going to get rid of the symptoms? Because look, they come round every week, they bring a pot roast. A mother who didn't bother with her when she was a child is suddenly turning up twice a week. That's good for her. So we're not going to drop the symptoms, because then the mother won't come again. And so you really are having to deal with dynamics as well as symptoms. And so I'd say to my clients, and when we're talking all together, I say, if you get to session 6 and symptoms are still there, now the archaeology has got to turn to the present situation and say, what is useful? And even in the book that I wrote that people can read for nothing, it's a free book, but even in that book, one guy didn't continue because he was starting a new business and he was worried that he might go to pieces and then his business would fail. So he then came back 3 years later and said, okay, the business is running, fix me. And we did. And so it's not linear. It's not linear. They might come up against a block and think, okay, I don't know what to do now. But the one thing is, to me, I feel that people have control over their own situation. They can decide decide if they want to change their living conditions. They can decide if they want to live their life another way, change their jobs. But just to give you an example, a very quick example, people might not understand. If you are suffering from a tremor in your hand and you're working in a dental surgery, which is highly bullying, and you're being bullied every day by a dentist who's a curmudgeon and the other people don't like you, and you're going into work and you're trying to hold the instruments and you've got a tremor in your hand. And then so you decide to go to hypnotherapy to get rid of the tremor. And when you go down into your hypnotherapy trance, your body makes it clear to you, any way it wishes, that the tremor is to stop you going to work. That situation is bullying. You've been bullied before as a kid. You've been bullied before at school. It doesn't want you to go into that dental surgery every day and be bullied. So it's giving you a tremor so you can't hold the instruments. And so I can't take away that tremor while you continue to go into a bullying environment unless you change your attitude to the bullying, unless you stand up against it, unless you decide that you're going to go and work in a different dental surgery. And I've had patients who have had severe physical symptoms, paralysis, tremors, Parkinson's, all these severe symptoms. And the day they either walked out or they changed their job or they stood up and said, pack it in, all tremors stopped, all paralysis vanished. So it's a negotiation. I always call it hostage negotiation meets couples counselling. It's a negotiation with your body. Freud said we are not in control of our own horse. And I think that we can take that in modern parlance to say, you're not always the one driving the bus. And if your body decides that it is correct to protect you by giving you this annoying tremor, you have to somehow negotiate with your body and do something so that it doesn't feel the tremor is necessary. And again, many people ridicule me for that, saying, what are you talking about? It's complete rubbish, but it's what they tell me. I went down, I spoke to this 7-year-old inside of me who told me, I'm sick of this, I hate being in the military, I want out, so I'm getting out. It wasn't me that made up that idea in their mind. It was them that went down and they heard what their body was telling them. And I think you do the same, don't you? You hear that day in, day out.
Yeah, I do. And the interesting part, I exactly agree with you that sometimes there are situations where it's not going to clear up in 6 hours or the 6th session or whatever basis you're doing it on. And I had someone that I worked with like that. And it took me a while. And I think you and I had some discussions actually about that person. And it was super fascinating to me to go through the process with her. And it was around drinking in a situation. And I finally had to be the one and say, okay, here's the situation. We're talking about this. And are you really sure that you want to do this? Because here's what's happening. And we went through a conversation about it. And she said, oh, I don't know. You're right. Maybe I'm not right at that place where I'm ready to let it go for whatever reason. And I said, all right, then we'll just take a break when you're ready. If you want to, when you think you're really ready. And she's come back to me a couple times and said, well, let's do this or let's adjust this. And so I do what she asks me to do. And I feel like it's like you said, this negotiation is going on with this part of her that's like got her in a grip that says, you're going to do it my way. And this is how it's going to be. And then it's like, well, all right, I guess I can let go a little bit and do that. And it's so fascinating to see because it is like you're dealing with this whole other person. It's them, this whole other version of them. And so it's crazy, amazing. Okay, we're going to stop there for today, but come back for the rest of this conversation next week. It'll be right here and there will be more wonderful stuff. Thanks, and you'll find all the information to connect with me or Sarah in the show notes. I hope today's episode was interesting and helpful to you in some way. If so, find someone to share it with. Maybe it will help them too. If you'd like to know more about anything discussed here today, you can find all the places to connect with me and the guest speakers in the show notes. Or go to lauraordile.com, LauraOrdile.com, and you can reach out to me there. Until next time, ask when you need help, be kind to yourself, and have a happy day.